Faces from Friday. My name is Ryan Lindsay. I am an associate professor of practice. I chair the mental health concentration. And in addition to that, I am also the assistant dean for social work. So I wear multiple hats. I teach, I advise, I do a lot of curricular development and also administrative work across the school. My area of mental health practice is I'm trained as a clinical social worker. I really work at the level of training clinicians to engage in evidence-based interventions that target at the level of individual, family, and groups. I also do a lot of work around suicide prevention in schools. So kind of bridging policies, school-based policies and practices, really to kind of mitigate and lower the dependency on the need for hospitalizations or emergency room visits for suicide risk assessment. My priority in that area is how do we raise the competencies of mental health professionals in their suicide risk assessments so that they can so they can feel confident in that and safe in their decision making, so they don't err on the better safe than sorry side of things that also have its own problematic outcomes and interacting with our medical system that is really organized around safety, but physical safety more so than emotional safety. And then I do a fair amount of suicide prevention work in our regional community here. So I have a kind of a generalist practice, but also specialty practice, bent to the work that I do. I also teach in the mental health concentration. I teach our theory course. I teach our differential diagnosis course, and I also teach several specialty practice courses, so electives that include motivational interviewing, prolonged exposure therapy, which is a specific treatment for PTSD, as well as dialectical behavior therapy. And then a final course I co-teach around suicide. So kind of across the range. And then my amazing colleague, Dr. Julie Mastnak, is here with us today to answer all of your questions. So Julie, if you want to introduce yourself.
Of course, and thank you for that introduction. So I'm Julie Mastnak. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I teach in the mental health concentration some of the practice courses, so specifically differential diagnosis and cognitive behavioral therapy. I also partner with Ryan to teach a postmaster certificate program in the assessment and treatment of trauma in adults. So I am a senior lecturer with the Brown School. In addition, I also am a clinician. So I've worked for more than 15 years as a frontline therapist treating trauma in veterans. And so I also work at the VA, and there's an incredible synergy that my clinical work, I think I can bring that experience into the classroom, and then teaching absolutely keeps me on the cutting edge of our field and enhances the clinical work that I do. So that's a little bit about me and what I teach here. I would say in terms of area of specialty, much like Ryan, we've got a lot of overlap in our areas of interest, but trauma-informed care is incredibly important to me, as is evidence-based practice.
So this is really a bit of an open call. It's a roundtable, so I don't have a specific agenda for our time. So I really want to kind of get to know each of you all and your questions about our program and how, clarify anything as you're deciding how you want to, pursue your future social work career. So who's got questions, either related to curriculum, related to practicum, related to career trajectories, licensing, all the things? What's it like in St. Louis?
Could I kick us off with a question?
Excellent.
Great. I would be curious to hear from the two of you just how how you think the clinical social work track is kind of how it's differentiated from the other tracks, the mental health concentration.
I have a slide that will help us orient us around that. So let's see if I can make this happen. Slide. Share. That's not what I need, but what about this? Do you see a full slide on there?
Not yet.
Not yet, no?
It's still just the PowerPoint.
Okay, hold on one second. Now do you see the full slide?
Still seeing the full PowerPoint screen.
The full PowerPoint screen with my other one?
Is that what you want to have pulled up? Perfect.
All right, y'all, let's try this one more time. Let's try this. Are we successful?
We are successful.
All righty. So here at the Brown School, we have 4 tracks in the mental health concentration. All of them are really centering interventions at the individual, family, and group level. So it's clinical social work. Clinical social work is defined by practice at the individual, family, and group level with an emphasis on mental health outcomes. So that includes a set of skills around engaging individuals, families, and groups, a set of skills around assessing individuals, families, and groups, and a set of interventions with individuals, families, and groups, and methods to evaluate the effectiveness of those interventions, okay? So we have a very, very heavy orientation towards clinical social work here at the Brown School. About 98% of students that come into the Brown School and choose the mental health concentration intend to pursue licensure and become a clinical social worker and practice at the individual, family, and group level. All right. So when we think about what is the difference between, the clinical social work track or the child behavioral health track or integrated behavioral health or the substance use disorder treatment track, it really is designed around what kinds of people and settings you're interested in working with. So clinical social work is your broadest course and is looking at and really aiming towards preparing people to work with older adolescents, young adults, and adults, and older adults with a focus on mental health outcomes. Where child behavioral health is, you're looking at young kiddos all the way into youth, and is an integration and really a collaboration between the mental health concentration and the children, youth, and families concentration. Integrated behavioral health is focused on a type of service that's place-based, meaning we're looking at settings that integrate behavioral health into physical health settings, so integrated behavioral health settings, or settings that are traditionally, mental health settings or behavioral health settings that are integrating physical health. So these could be federally qualified health centers. These are community mental health systems as well. And these are like clinical social workers embedded in primary care settings. So they're usually brief interventions, so 8 to 12 sessions that people get. They're really targeted towards the holistic health context, and so integrated behavioral health is really about the settings in which you're wanting to work. Where clinical social work and substance use disorder treatment, the track is actually all the courses are the same as clinical social work. But this is differentiated because it prepares all students upon graduation to meet the NCCAP certification, which is the national exam and the national certification for substance use disorder treatment providers, and requires a specific kind of practicum and an extra credit of practicum So when you graduate the program, you can sit for that exam and prepares you to enter the field, having met all the criteria for that certification standard. So it's just slightly different, same curriculum, but is differentiated really about where you do your practicum, and then there is an extra hour or 120 hours that has to be completed. That certification requires 1,000 hours of practicum experience, and our program offers 900. So that is the difference between the tracks. You know, I think the thing is at this point in anyone's career, it's okay if you don't know which track. If you're uncertain, just choose the clinical social work track. You can always take courses in your as part of your electives that, you know, can bridge you know, the other, any interest that you might have. Most jobs that you're going to be applying for are really going to be looking at a holistic curriculum. But, you know, if you're looking to work with youth, usually they're going to be looking that you had a practicum with youth. And so if you're uncertain, maybe do a foundation practicum in a youth setting and a concentration practicum with adults. So you have an opportunity to kind of flex that however you wish. So questions kind of building off of that.
I have a question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Rachel. Nice to meet all you guys. So just going off of that, I'm personally, there's like multiple tracks that I'm interested in. I think I'm interested in working with both children and adolescents, which is obviously both of them. So is it true that you don't have to choose until your second year?
Correct. Until about mid-semester in your spring of your first year, you probably want to have a good idea, because for registration that happens in early April, you'll want to be able to know what you're going to prioritize. You don't have to choose until you finish 30 hours of credits. What I would say is, if you're at all interested in children, I would just say do the child behavioral health track. The reason being is that it's going to really hone in. The theory course is what's majorly different, as well as one of the practice methods courses. And that will not hurt. That's only going to be helpful in work with adolescents. So child behavioral health includes adolescents. They both overlap. So if you go the route of child behavioral health, you can choose from a practice methods that either focuses on early childhood, children, or youth, which is inclusive at adolescents.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Other questions about the curriculum?
I guess this is kind of about the curriculum. It's kind of a practicum based question, which I know the practicum is part of the curriculum. If you also are planning on doing like a specialization, would you more recommend trying to do the foundation practicum looking at that specialization, or when you do your concentration, try to find if you can do a practicum that covers both of them?
Well, it's easier to do it when you can do it within the same practicum. What it means is that 120 hours of your concentration practicum is devoted towards your specialization. So that means if you're a research specializer, 120 hours of that 600 you have to complete needs to be devoted towards research or whatever policy or whatever the specialization might be. It's much harder to find something separate that's only 1 credit. That's equivalent to 1 credit of practicum. Although it does, you know, some students do pursue that. Other questions about curriculum, career, licensing?
Hi. Could you talk about some of the common electives that folks take? I know you all mentioned some of the ones that you instruct. I'm curious to hear more about those.
Yeah. Julie, you want to talk about the electives you teach?
I would love to talk about that. Yes. So I teach CBT. It's one of my favorite courses to teach, in part because I have such a commitment to evidence-based assessment and treatment. And many of those evidence-based interventions really have a foundation in CBT. So I think it's a great elective course. The way that the class is structured is really to support advanced skill development. And so, my teaching philosophy is, I think if we're learning in a way that really allows students to not only kind of understand the material, but really integrate it, that they can take it out of the classroom and into practice. Part of what's important is that, that students read the material, they hear the material in lecture. I actually will demonstrate many of the interventions in class, and then there'll be an opportunity to do psychotherapy simulations where we practice the interventions in class. So it's a very kind of comprehensive way of learning some of the basic CBT competencies, and it's just a fun class to teach.
And then on this slide is a range of some of the many classes that we do offer. And if it has a 3 behind it, it means it's a 3 credit hour course. If it has a 1, it's a 1 credit hour course, although I do see some errors in this. So don't quote me on every single one of them. They've changed since I made this slide. So some of the options we have, I teach a motivational interviewing skills lab. Skills labs really mostly take place on the weekends. So they're intensive. They're Saturday and Sunday generally. Occasionally you'll get one that might be like 5 weeks for 3 hours each, or 3 weeks for 5, there might be, and that's based on the instructor or faculty members' schedule sometimes. We have partnerships with faculty members all over the nation. So, so it depends on that. But what I would say is that, we do skew heavily towards the existing repertoire of evidence-based interventions, which really are grounded in cognitive behavioral theories. And what we look at, is taking a look at a critical lens of, who and with whom and how do these interventions work, and how do we need to be rethinking how we're putting interventions together and programs together so that we can better tailor them to be more culturally responsive and reflective and relevant in many ways. There's no point in having an amazing intervention that works but is unacceptable to a community. And so we do have conversations about how we think about that dissemination and implementation element of programming. So I teach motivational interviewing, which is really a set of engagement skills that centers on resolving ambivalence to change. So this is a really strong kind of grounding and foundational set of strategies for working in any setting. I also teach a course called dialectical behavior therapy, which is a type of cognitive behavioral therapy, but it's specifically designed to work with individuals who really struggle to regulate emotions, and as a result end up really, developing a set of strategies that can be really harmful, that include suicidality, self-injury, or other kinds of behaviors that really decrease their quality of life. And so I teach that. We have an amazing course that's been developed at the national level, and so we implement its version here called Core Concepts of Trauma Treatment, and that's actually for children and youth. We have a pharmacology course. I think it's essential that all social workers, especially working at the clinical level, understand the full range of medications and biological interventions. To date, we don't have any data that says one way is better than the other. And so we need to, as clinical social workers, be able to integrate knowledge across disciplines, but also understand and have the language to have conversations when we're in positions of advocacy for our clients. We have a global mental health. I'm really excited because the public health program has now developed a behavioral health specialization. So for anyone who is interested on the more prevention and mental health promotion side, that is generally falls within the public health realm, although a lot of social workers do that kind of work. And so you can really expand exposure to a more prevention framework and promotion framework based on the courses that are offered on the public health side. Any course listed on the public health side of our program and even social policy side of our program is eligible for electives. So they're either cross-listed already, or you can, and many of them actually meet social work requirements too. So other questions about electives or curriculum?
I have a question based kind of off of what you were just chatting about.
Yeah.
I'm curious how many students you have that do like a clinical social work concentration and then double major in public health, or if they feel like they get enough knowledge from the classes you were just discussing that the double major isn't necessary.
Well, we have a fair number on this call that are planning to do MSW MPH. What I would say, it's a different set of they're a different set of strategies. So the population health and focus on community health that public health preparation provides, as well as the deeper research, advanced research skills that are included within the public health curriculum, is not the same as the social work curriculum. Our social work curriculum is really oriented around program evaluation. So you have a program, we're ensuring, we want to give you a set of skills to be able to evaluate that program, but it's less focused on community and population health set of strategies. And so public health gives you a broader set of skills, knowledge base, but it's also it's also focused in prevention and promotion models, which is different often at the point of where social work intervenes, which is often more downstream. So we need both of these professions doing really important work. And I think your career trajectory and career goals is what would orient you towards whether or not you would want to do the dual degree or not. For me, I would say I entered my career with solely the focus on clinical interventions at the individual family level. I will say in my career now, I wish I had way more of those public health skills. And so as my career has evolved, it's actually become more public health oriented, because my desired impact has moved more towards addressing the inequities and access and equity in the quality of services that people receive. Our system shouldn't be set up where it's you roll a die and whether you get it, not to toot my own horn, but get into services with Ryan, who has extensive training in evidence-based intervention, supervision, and expertise around that, and someone who does not and doesn't follow a set of strategies that have a predictability of working. And that, for me, that shouldn't be, the case. And so my career has followed a trajectory that moved it away from, although there's nothing more rewarding and raise my, the hair on the back of my neck is when I'm working with individuals, families, and groups, and people heal. For me, my goals became more about how do we get more people better equipped to promote more healing. And that's kind of how my career has evolved.
Nice, that's helpful, thank you.
Yeah, Julie, I don't know if you have any thoughts or adding to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Ryan, just to echo what you said, I think that's part of the reason that teaching is so important to me, that it really is about inspiring the next generation of clinicians with that understanding of the impact that evidence-based practice can have, and understanding how to deliver those interventions in a way that is culturally responsive. And so I think that's the place where teaching to me is just, you know, it truly is, it is a passion, and it's something that I care about very deeply.
And each of our careers evolve differently.
Sure.
Where I have too many roles that I don't have the emotional capacity to hold clinical work. So I spend all of my time training the next generation. And if I had more time in my schedule where I could devote, because the clients I work with tend to be chronically suicidal, the kind of intervention that I provide, I am accessible to them 24/7. And I'm in too many meetings to be able to give them the quality of care that they need. So my role has evolved outside the clinical realm to be more focused on clinical supervision, training, competency, and then also policy and practices. That took 20 years. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay, sorry, my webcam is having a Monday. But I guess one of my questions was with regarding the curriculum. Oh, I think I totally just spaced. What was it about? Oh, it was about auditing classes. Like, do you find that like students generally audit any classes outside of the department or within the department? Is that something that's sort of
so as far as a technical auditing, we do not allow auditing. We have too many students in our school who are wanting to take these courses, and so there's a limitation to the number of the course enrollment. So Washington University in St. Louis does not allow auditing of any courses. However, any of you can take electives in any graduate program on campus. And so if you know, with permission of the instructor, and many undergraduate courses, if you find them to be very interesting and they would expand, you know, the contextualizing the work that you're doing, we have amazing departments. Those instructors can be asked to add additional activities and outcomes to raise the undergraduate level to a graduate level course. That has to go through an approval. As the assistant dean, I do approve those right now. And so there are options for that. We also have an inter-university exchange program with the University of Missouri, St. Louis, as well as St. Louis University. And so you can also take courses in their, you know, at those universities, in their schools of social work. They have different areas of specialty. Every school has, you know, has a different kind of bent based on the faculty and the kind of work that that faculty do. Sure. And so there are students who routinely take courses just at our neighborly campuses. Additionally, if you want to take courses at other universities, you can do that. But that would be additional tuition through that other university. Sure. The inter-university exchange program that we have here, you can take those courses and you pay our tuition. Oh, okay. So it can be included in your 18 credits per semester.
Okay. One other question is, so on the flip side, are we able to like take like, I mean, I guess it would be tough to take like a doctoral seminar, right? There's no way to petition for possibly, you know, the instructor for possibly admitting you to a PhD seminar, if there is one that's interesting.
You could petition that, and I don't know what the doctoral program's policy is around that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Usually for all of those, you need data sets to be able to kind of hang with that. So okay. If you have access to data sets, that might be a prerequisite for those courses. So okay. Other questions?
Hello. Could you talk about what the LCSW process looks like for students after completing the mental health concentration?
Sure. I'm also going to put a link up here. Give me 2 seconds. This is a link to the Brown School. It's a mental health page that I've cultivated, which is a wealth of resources around our curriculum, the courses that we offer with some summaries, and also helps orient each of you towards this licensing process. So the first thing that everyone has to understand about licensing is that licenses are regulated by states. What that translates to is every single state has a different process and standards in terms of eligibility for their licensing. So the first thing you have to understand is that, you know, at a basic level, every single state requires an MSW from an accredited CSWE, Council on Social Work Education accredited program. So we meet that clearly for any state. Other states, some states have a requirement, and it's more generic, that you have to prove that you took a clinical course of study. So if you take any of these tracks in mental health, that meets that requirement. Other states require specific coursework. Usually what they state is something called psychopathology. So a course on psychopathology, though antiquated the course is called, that's what's embedded in these state regulations. That's our differential diagnosis course. So that's the equivalent of. And then they also mandate a treatment planning and intervention course. And so that's our principles of clinical interventions in behavioral health. And a bunch of other courses actually fall underneath that kind of domain. Every state, so I would visit this website, take a look at your state. And what I would also say is if there's a specific state you are looking or interested in moving to immediately after graduation, review the requirements. Some states require state-specific coursework. So we're obviously not going, California is a prime example. There's specific laws and California-specific education that they require. Obviously, our program isn't going to provide that, but they're easily available via like professional development workshops because people have to do that a lot. Some states require state jurisprudence exams. So that's the state ethics and laws, which we are, you know, as a program are not going to individually tailor anybody's education around because it would be impossible. And so you want to look at that. And then beyond that, then the process really is what's mostly differentiated by state is that who can be your clinical supervisor post-graduation, like the eligibility for those supervisors are different. So for example, in the state of Missouri, a person has had to have held their clinical social work license for 5 years prior to being eligible to be a licensing supervisor. Other states don't require that. Other states require longer periods of time. And so there's variance in that. The other piece that is different by state licensing is some states require you to track every face-to-face hour that you work with clients. So for example, Kansas has a 1,500 hour face-to-face requirement, meaning you have to document and submit documentation of every interaction that adds up to 1,500 that also your supervisor signs off on. Other states like Missouri, which are less regulated in that way, being employed full-time gives you 2,000 hours a year. So the biggest thing that I often tell students post-graduation is pick a state, go there for 2 years, get licensed, then move around. Generally speaking, once you are licensed, there is a lot of the standard is if you've met licensing in another state, we will accept that. So licensing transfer there's a lot of bureaucratic things that you have to work with. So that part's not easy. But generally speaking, they will honor the other states. That said, I would say if you are looking at specific states and you know where you're going to eventually end up, just make sure, because I don't know all 50 states' regulations. So you want to kind of double check that. In terms of the process, is almost all the states use a kind of a two-layered exam. So first is a generalist social work exam that is put on by the Association for Social Work Boards. And then a second exam is a clinical social work exam, also hosted and put on by the Association for Social Work Boards. Some states don't require both of them. Some states require the generalist exam to start your clinical hours to count towards your licensing. So generally what happens is upon graduation, you really want to sign up for that first exam. You can be anywhere because every state uses them. So it doesn't matter where you're located. And it's the same, they're permutations of the same exam. And so you want to get that out of the way earlier rather than later, because many states, your clinical hours, even if you get a job full-time, if you haven't passed your exam, if you wait 6 months to take that exam, then you've lost six months of supervision hours towards your licensing. So you want to do that relatively quickly. And also the further you get out from being done with school, we're an amazing program, but it's rigorous and you're gonna be tired. So the idea, like once you get out and you get into your world, trying to get yourself back into the state of studying is really, really hard. And what I tell students is, although your program is 2 years, if you're not advanced standing, your training is actually 4 to 4.5 years, like in terms of clinical social work. So just because your formal curriculum is done at 2 years, that doesn't mean you stop studying, and it doesn't mean you stop learning. That whole next level of supervision is your practical, training in social work, in clinical social work. So you're really signing up for a 4-year program towards your degree. Probably more than you all needed to know. But the website will go down, and you don't have to worry about anything related to licensing until you're almost ready to graduate. What other questions do we have about the Brown School, mental health, career trajectories? Anything specific for me or Julie, or working, with veterans? Julie is an amazing human being doing really important work over there.
I have a question for Julie, actually, about the certification for trauma practice with adults that you mentioned. If you can give more information about that, and then also if there are other certifications that are available, that'd be great.
Yes. So Ryan and I have actually partnered with some other colleagues, and we teach together the Postmaster Certificate Program for trauma assessment and treatment in adults. There's several other Postmasters programs available as well. And I think, part of this really speaks to Ryan's point. I would even take it a step further to say that I think in the career path that we are in, it really is about lifelong learning and really kind of committing to an area of expertise and continuing additional training and experience to further refine our skill set. And so that's part of the Postmaster Certificate Training Program. And so it is available. Ryan, it's for individuals that have a master's degree. Is that correct? Yes. And it is a fairly intensive training. So we just restructured it, but it is 5 full days of training, including some consultation that follows the training experience. So again, really that kind of commitment that you'll see throughout the Brown School to evidence-based practice and into lifelong learning.
Yeah, and really this is designed, your MSW program formal training, like schooling is 2 years, 1 year if you're at advanced standing, or 1.5 years. And the reality is, even all those wonderful electives we put up there, not everybody will be doing that in your practicum. And so in the absence of being able to be in a space where you're implementing these strategies, you get to learn them, you get to learn about them, but learning how to do them is usually going to come later in your, in your career as you scaffold those competencies. And so about 5 years ago, I think it's been, we really came together and said, how do we continue to support lifelong learning and deepening competencies for clinicians, so that for those who didn't get an opportunity during their own program to learn in evidence-based interventions, or weren't in a position where they could apply them and are now in a position to apply them. These are a set of competencies that really we help to facilitate at that level. So with the pandemic, and we're learning a little bit different. We've also thought about more accessible ways to receive these types of experiences. Right now, I'm putting together one in suicide prevention and intervention strategies, where less than 20% of any social work program or mental health program actually has formal training in suicide risk assessment. And anything beyond 2 hours within those trainings. And so in order to help, increase the accessibility to those competencies and the evidence-based interventions that are associated with and the evolving information of what we're learning. So I'm in the process of putting that together right now, which just reminds me, I've got to get that finished like ASAP, because I got to get it in front of that curriculum committee by 2 weeks from now. So it's good to know. I need to make note of that. I'm 90% done with it. It's just a presentation now that I got to get together. Okay. Reminders. Other questions?
I have a practicum related question. Given the popularity of the mental health concentration, there are going to be many of us who will be seeking out practicum experiences, and certainly a lot of nuance and interest, but do students struggle to, is there a lot of competition for the same types of practicums? Is there any struggle for folks in obtaining practicum experiences in the areas that they're trying to?
Yeah, I think everybody's experience is a little bit different. Obviously, there are a set of practicums that are more coveted, and so there's more competition for them. So more students are applying for them, where there are a limited number of options for that. So that does happen. We have plenty of practicum opportunities to meet the mental health need, and there's a range of skills that provide you opportunities that will provide you with a range of skills in each of those contexts. What you want to be thinking about is the most important skills you're wanting to learn in your program are engagement and assessment skills. Intervention comes later anyways. So although we're all coming here and we want to be in that seat and doing the intervention elements, the reality is your career trajectory prior to licensing is the scope of your practice is limited anyways. So although it apply for these, what you need to be doing is getting opportunities to engage with a diverse set of humans, because when you're hiring, you want to be able to say and demonstrate that I'm okay with humans. I can sit down. It doesn't, I've learned the skills and strategies around engagement, and then also assessment. So from a broader kind of comprehensive psychosocial assessment into differential diagnostics. Those are the things that you really need to be focused on, because very few people get the opportunity for extensive intervention. And a part of that is there's a reason why there's a scope of practice limitation until you're licensed, is because it takes years to develop strong competencies doing that. And so we have a range of opportunities that include that and are fully supportive of that. But what you really need to be looking at is to ensure that there's engagement and assessment strategies. Any other questions about the program or curriculum, practicum? Oh, something I said in my on the roundtable on Friday. One of the most underutilized, but one of the biggest values for your money is actually all of those workshops that our professional development department puts on annually. They put on almost 300 per year. I don't know what next year is going to be looking like, given we're still in this state of flux. That said, most of these are available to students for $10. So these are usually 3-hour workshops. These are with existing professionals in the field. They're great like networking opportunities, but also, you know, there's a limited amount of time you know, and bandwidth you will have to take courses. And so that you're going to be presented with that, I got to choose. And that's okay. But you can always kind of dip your toe in a lot of different, you know, exposure to content by exploring these professional development opportunities. And so they're great networking, and these are very skilled. I teach a lot of them. Julie teaches them. And so like our faculty are teaching these. And so make sure you take a look at that as an option. And the other thing that I also tell students and suggest and advise students is that, you know, learning is a process, and there's only so much information a person's brain can take in. And so there's a couple different ways you can approach your MSW trajectory, your program, by taking as many classes as you possibly can, so that at the end you can say you felt like you got your money's worth, which is fine. The downside to that is that if you're not going to be able to encode the learning, then there's no point in taking that course now. That what you need to be able to do is be able to put this information into action so you land your first interview. You know, what we are preparing you for is to enter the field, not your entire professional journey. And that you have a lifetime of learning. So much of my specialized skill set came after my program. So when you're thinking about trying to take a lot, ask yourself if you can learn at that level of stress. It's not worth costing yourself mental distress when you won't retain the information. And learning requires quiet reflection. Like when we think about learning consolidation, what we understand from the science is that in the absence of slowing down, being able to think, to reflect, and think about how to translate this into either ground it in your current experience or ground it in your practicum experience, or some way be able to translate it. It's just information, and information rarely sits without the grounding that is included with reflection. And so if you have to chronically be moving from one topic class material to the next topic and class material and the next assignment, that leaves you no space to reflect. And it is much better to be able to reflect and to encode and to make sense of this and digest it, so that then in your interviews you can articulate it in a way that makes sense, than it is to have taken all the courses but not be able to formulate a single interview around it, because the depth is so thin that it's as if you didn't take it at all. You know, I've read many book in my life that I'm like, I know I read this book, but I don't remember reading it. I did that with the 5th Harry Potter. I read that twice. I didn't realize I'd already read it until I was 3/4 of the way through. The whole time I'm like, why does this feel so familiar? Why do I keep, this is so predictable. But no, it's because I read it already. So, and we don't want to be like that. Okay. Don't be Ryan's 5th version, 2nd time around in the 5th Harry Potter book. So that's just some advice. It's up to you. It's your program. You get to drive how that goes. But you really need to recognize that learning requires the reflection. And you have your entire career to scaffold and build upon. So that is my advice. Julie, do you have any advice?
I was just going to say, I think there's wisdom in that advice, Ryan. And I think part of the scaffolding comes from networking. It's one of the things that I think our school does well, whether it's, through the faculty members that you will meet or through some of the professional development seminars. But I think that's another way to commit to lifelong learning, right? To find subject matter experts, to find mentors in the field and really network with those individuals so that you can continue, again, the learning that doesn't mean that you just kind of learn it up here and that you can be able to produce it for a paper or a test, but that you really do consolidate and integrate the information, that there's that true sense of learning that then you carry into your work. Yeah. And I think networking with mentors has always been helpful in my professional path to continue to consolidate that learning.
Yeah. And also, faculty, I have a class with 25 students in there. So I might know your name and I might know your performance on either an exam or an activity, but that doesn't mean I know you. I really think it's very important for you to find your mentors, to reach out and introduce yourself to your faculty members. Do not be dissuaded when you email them and they don't respond to you. Just do it again. As faculty members, we are, we're juggling a lot of things, but that doesn't mean that we don't want to prioritize and don't actually receive a huge amount of reinforcement from getting to know our students. And it's just the fast pace of things does make an email list go really, really long. But at the end of the day, we become a part of your network, and I can only serve as your reference that will provide like the depth of reference. If I know who you are, if I know what your journey is, what you want, who you want to become as a social worker, what brought you to this space. And so if you reach out to me for a reference later, then not only I know who you are, I also know your work. And even if I haven't seen you demonstrate this in your practicum, I'm still able to see how you've been able to bring that into the classroom and into your desired trajectory. So that doesn't mean you have to do that with every faculty member, but it is important that you do find your network and that you introduce yourself and because that'll be important. I get informal and formal requests from colleagues all over the United States when our students apply. And I want to be able to say, this person's amazing, not they were in my class and they did well. There's a difference in my email response, or yes, I know them, or no, I don't know them. So the only way to do that is for us to get to know you.
And for you to get to know us. I think it's one of the strengths of our school. We have an incredible faculty. We really do. So not only faculty members that are incredibly just smart and talented in their field, like subject matter experts, but just people who are genuinely invested in supporting our students and, again, kind of inspiring the next generation that is coming into this field. So I think those connections are definitely one of the strengths of the school and something that I value.
Yeah.
I have one more question, if that's all right.
Yeah.
And I'm asking both Julie and Ryan. Professor Lindsay. Kind of going off of talking about stress and things. Obviously, we are going to learn, constantly be learning how to, as social workers, distinguish like our career from our own mental health. Mm-hmm. And how can we help all these, you're doing difficult work. We're all going to be doing difficult work. What advice do you have? And, or you could just say, you know what, you're going to learn it as you go. But if you just had a piece of advice on how you guys have found kind of like peace with your work, while being able to separate yourself from it.
Yeah. Julie, you want to go first?
Sure. So that's a great question. So I think I've got a couple of thoughts. One is that, like, for me, right, I'll talk in my CBT class sometimes about the importance of like value-driven decision-making and kind of value-driven behaviors. And like, this is something that I value. I value working with individuals. I value healing. I value recovery. I also very much value teaching. And so for me, that's part of what allows me to do work that is sometimes difficult, is because I believe that it's important. It's something I'm passionate about. Right. The other thing I think is important is self-care and creating that boundary between work and being able to take care of yourself. So that involves kind of self-awareness and continual self-assessment and knowing yourself well enough to be able to kind of hold those boundaries and take care of yourself. So those are some of my initial thoughts. Ryan?
Yeah. One, you'll be learning throughout your entire career. And I think what I would say is that the earlier you get started on kind of, social workers talk about self-care, and we document that we don't engage in self-care. So we have to start from the beginning, and we have to prioritize. If you think about this work is unique because of the emotional toll that it does take. We're holding intense stories of pain all the time. So if we are going to be equipped to hold intense levels of pain, we have to kind of train for that. A part of training for that is attending to our own mental health, is attending to the things that we're going to teach all of our clients. We have to sleep. We have to eat good things. We have to have the nutrition we need, and we need to move our bodies and exercise. Like, fundamentally, these are the first things that we teach every client, because these things help reduce vulnerabilities. So we got to kind of, I wish I would have just listened to my own advice early on. And I'm really stubborn, so I had to like fall on my face first before I was like 30 times. And then I'm like, okay, Ryan, you're going to need to do this. You can't just do that, because it's taking on a level of stress that is very different than most people have to take on. And so there's really no way around that. I think the other piece is that each of us have been touched in different ways, and either have our own experiences with mental health, have family members or peers or people in our lives that have been touched by mental health conditions. And that creates complicated understanding. And our own personal relationship to mental health matters a lot, because we do need to learn how to differentiate what is our own histories operating in this moment, and that we are projecting this or reenacting our own histories on others, versus knowing what is ours to own, and that is separate than the work that we are doing with others. And that takes a lot of time, effort. We do need to be addressing and prioritizing our own mental health. We need to have our mental health team engaged. We need to be able to recognize that it is our responsibility as a professional to have our mental health in a space so we can be helpful to others, and also recognize when we may be in a space that we can't be helpful to others. There's limitations. And so that everybody's relationship to that is very different. We each come from different backgrounds and narratives around what mental health is and should be or shouldn't be. These social constructs matter a lot, and we have to do a lot of work on dismantling these social constructs that are consistent with shame, or belief systems, or our own theories of why people act the way they do, or how people heal. Sometimes what we believe to be true is in fact inconsistent with the science, and we have to be open to this growth. And we may have had our own experiences and hate it the use of an intervention you'll learn. And there's likely lots of truth in the capacity to hate that intervention. And just because it didn't work for our own mental health journey doesn't mean it won't work for others. So, you know, as professional and ethical social workers, we have to also look at the data, where just because it doesn't work for us doesn't mean it doesn't work for others. Or just because it does work for us doesn't mean it will work for everyone else. Same kind of thing. We don't have all the answers. We've got a long way to go. There's a lot of work to be done. And that's a lot of that work is what you all will be doing as next generation of social workers, carrying this work forward, because it's limited to our understanding of this moment. So I know that just took a diatribe and took us 4 minutes over. So we'll be respectful of all your time and let Sarah close us out.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Julie. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It was a really great conversation. Hopefully you all learned a lot. And of course, if you have more questions after this conversation, feel free to reach out to any of us. You can always reach out to Brown Admissions at worcester.edu, and we can get you connected with Ryan or Julie. Otherwise, hope you all have a wonderful day. And thanks again. We'll see you all soon.